Most people tell me as soon as they hear the way I speak, they know that I've been a teacher. And in fact, that is true. Teacher of biology and life sciences, took a lot of pride in having all of my students really involved in what they were doing in the classroom. It wasn't enough to read about it, you had to do it, you had to have hands-on. In the early 80s, I took a leave of absence from my teaching position. It was actually a maternity leave when my second daughter was born, and we traveled at the age of 7 weeks, took her 4,000 miles west of California, about 6 to 8 degrees north of the equator, to a little coral atoll, which is a place where the government has some work that is going on there, and my husband was involved in the radars. But what was interesting to me is that my first year, totally engrossed in taking care of my daughter. The second year I was there, I was beginning to reach out a little bit and looking for things to do. Well, being a military base, there are families there, and there needed to be a school, which was a contract school. A few people learned that I was a science teacher and said, "Oh, would you be willing to sub at the high school?" So I said, okay. The first day I was asked to come in and sub for the high school biology teacher, and the kids were doing a lab that you might even remember from your days in high school biology. They were looking at the cross-section of a leaf, and they were using the microscopes to do this. Well, so what's the big deal? In this particular class, everything was done precisely. In order, the kids would go up and take their microscopes off the racks. And then I would hand out the worksheets to them. They had their instructions. They had their textbooks, which were open. And they put their slides on the microscope. And I said, something's wrong here. But I started wandering around the room, and the kids were giving me all these looks at the fact that I was wandering around the room. And I asked to look through some of the microscopes. And they really seemed concerned at that point. And then I would look at what they were drawing and what they were doing, and it became obvious they were copying the picture from the textbook. And that's not what they were seeing in the microscope. But the best example of this was one young man who was sitting in the back of the classroom, and he is dutifully copying the picture just as it appears in the textbook. And I asked him about that. I said, why don't you draw what it is that you're seeing? And he said, because I want to get it right. You know, the thing that he needed and that all the students needed in the classroom was they had to get it right. And I said, well, at least take a look. And I put my eye to the eyepiece and looked through his microscope. Try as I might, there was no way to focus the microscope. And he had been working with the same microscope for the entire year, and he'd never seen anything correctly for that entire time because the teacher never got out of his desk, never walked around the room, never shared any experiences, but it really put microscope experiences in a different light for me.